out there to kind of take your mind off of certain things. And so I pick up the mail and I get a letter that says, I'm not coming to Calvary anymore. Just take my name off. I thought, okay, what's that about? And you try reaching out to the people and they won't take your phone call. Okay, so what went wrong? I come back and people are spreading rumors about me. And I'm thinking, okay, so what else? I heard that I've resigned, by the way. And that's really cool because as I've told you all, I am not resigning, okay? I am retiring. There is a difference. Resign, you get up and you walk away. Retire says you step down from a position, but I'm not going anywhere, okay? I will still be here. I will be filling in. I will be going other places to fill in to preach, probably, with some people call and stuff. But my job, as I've tried to tell you all, in this period of life, as you can look around, it takes a lot of time to pastor a church. And especially in preparation for sermons, but also in talking to people who are struggling. And let me tell you, there are people here that are struggling, really struggling. And I keep telling them, I'm here to talk anytime you want to talk. I'm here because that's important. Some other avenues are opening up, and it's not just to move away. One of the things in the city of Middletown, I think I've shared with you, the city of Middletown has understood there is a mental health problem in Middletown, a major mental health problem in Middletown. And the last 2 years or 3 years now almost of the pandemic has not just affected adults. It is affecting children all the way from age 7 on. Teenage suicide is out of this world. And the problem is the church is pushing it back and not doing anything. And I shared with them, I said, how many churches do you know are even prepared for this? And they said, we don't know any. And I said, that's the problem. We don't have any. Because what we aren't equipped, we don't know it, don't know the signs. You can sit here and talk to me, and I can almost diagnose what you've got. I can tell you whether you've got social anxiety. I can tell whether you've got anxiety, depression. I can tell you if you're struggling with PTSD. I can tell you here's what we do, all of the things that are there. And it's what we do is we send people to doctors and they medicate. And medicate only, it basically just takes care of the symptoms. It doesn't take care of the issues. Why? Because most doctors have no idea how to spiritually help people who are struggling with anxiety, social anxiety, depression, PTSD, and other things. They have no clue. So what do? They just shove them off somewhere. And I said, we need something. And so we're putting together. It's a whole thing. It's been out there, a thing for a healthy coalition for Middletown. But it's more than just Middletown. It's the world. Rick Warren, who lost his son a few years ago to suicide. And everybody said, how in the world could that happen to a pastor? Pastors' children and pastors' families are families suffering and struggling with some of the same things that everybody else is struggling with. And sometimes more. And understanding that we're dealing with those things, and so we understand what other people are going through and dealing with. And so on Monday, a lot of times, most pastors turn in their resignation. And when I look at what's going on, sometimes I get discouraged. I really do. Lord, am I just sticking around? Because I said I would never stick around to kill a church. But what's killing this church and multitudes of churches is people who leave the church and badmouth the church. If you're gone, go. If you didn't like it, then go somewhere else. Don't tell me that you didn't learn anything while you were here. Because if you didn't learn anything, you evidently weren't here on Sunday night or Wednesday night. Or Sunday morning too. And it's not the pastor. Most of the time you're going to find it's the members who have a problem that they don't want to deal with. So let's just push it off to the guy that stands in the front. Well, so the message today was just the same thing, because what happened was Sunday night I got a phone call from a little girl, not a little girl anymore, and asked this question: are you guys having services tonight? And I said, well, we haven't. We have them on Wednesday night. She said, oh man, I wish you had services tonight because I would really like to come. So what happens Wednesday night? Most of the time on Wednesday night, we've had maybe 3-4 kids. Wednesday night, we had 18 kids. That's what happened Wednesday night. Wednesday night, we had 32, including the kids, on Wednesday night. You know how many we had last Sunday morning? 39. We had many people on Wednesday night, almost as much as we had on Sunday morning, which says we need to readjust some things. So we need to sit down and talk, church, on where do we put our priorities? Where do we see? Because this pandemic has killed us as individuals, because you won't believe how many people that I'm looking at right now and talking to who feel like life is hopeless. People that want to come to church but can't come to church because they're sick. And they need comfort. A lot of those. I walked in yesterday to see Thenie, and she's laying there. She can't get up without help, because if she tries to get up by herself, she falls. And when she falls, she's going to break her hip again or break her femur or whatever else. And she and I were talking. She said, you know what, Brother Cotton? She said, you don't know how much I wish that I could get out of this bed and go to church. And every time she was able to come, she came. But there's coming a day, ladies and gentlemen, that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be laying in bed wishing that they could come to church. And they had the opportunity and they didn't. And I'm not getting on people that can't be here physically. But this pandemic has made it too convenient not to come to church. And the problem is, whether you realize it or not, God said one thing: it is not good for man to be alone. Which means also it's not good for me to sit at home by myself when I could get out and go to church. Because why? I need that touch. And also, I need the Holy Spirit. Yes, do I have the Holy Spirit with me? Absolutely. But if I'm an army of one, I'm not going to kill many enemies. But when I'm an army of 41, with all of us armed, we can kill a big enemy. And sometimes we forget about those things. So let's talk about Jonah. We finished with Jonah. He's in this whale. So let's get him out of the whale, if y'all don't mind. I think he's been there a little bit too long. So we're gonna talk about some things. And again, if you remember, we talked about in a couple of weeks ago that we learned by certain things, okay? And there are 3 things that we learn. We learn by experience. We go through it. We learn by an explanation. People teach us those things. And then we learn by example. For instance, in order how to hit a baseball, somebody's got to show me and help me. And once they show me, we get the knack of it. If cooking or whatever else it is that you're doing. And you learn by those examples. And so we're going to talk about this guy who was on mission from God. He was the original blues brother on a mission from God. And we need to learn by example that what did he do? He ran from God, trying to run from God. Ends up in the fish, okay? And if I have a hard time reading today, it's because I got an old set of glasses. I had no idea what happened Friday night, but I was sleeping Friday night, Saturday, and in the middle of the night, I'm wearing my CPAP now, which is helping me sleep. I ripped the mask off, and the mask went one way, the tube went another, and I just happened to have my glasses, and I still can't find my glasses. I've thrown them somewhere way across the bedroom, and we've looked everywhere, and I don't know where those glasses are at, so I have to wear these other ones, and they're kind of hard for me to see, okay? So if I miss my words and everything, you'll know why. Okay, so anyway, God's got this mission for all of us in our life, and we need to understand that what God placed us on this earth for is to complete a mission. And may I say to you, every one of us, our mission is not impossible. God never gives you and I an impossible task. It may be impossible for us, but Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. So if I learn that I got a helper on my mission in life, and his name is Jesus, then my mission is not impossible because Jesus has already made the impossible possible. And as long as I keep that thought, then I understand it's okay. But what happens, or what do you do when you feel hopeless? When it just seems like everything's gone out. And so we're going to go into Jonah chapter 2 today, and remember what God had told to Jonah. I want you, Jonah, not your neighbor, not your brother, not anybody else. I want you to go to Nineveh, okay? And so I want you to tell this message to these people. 3 days, they're done. That's your message. You just go. I don't want any explanation. I just want you to go. And that's all you're to say. 3 days, God says he's going to destroy this place. And you just keep repeating it and keep going, okay? And so again, what does he do? He goes and he gets on it. And Nineveh was like 550 miles away from where he lived. He gets on a boat, boards it for Tarsus, which is on the coast of Spain, and it's 2,500 miles away. So instead of going 500 miles in one way, he's going 2,500 miles in the other way. He's getting as far away from God as he can, and far away from Nineveh as he can. He thinks he's going to the uttermost parts of the world, okay? So last week, we kind of looked at the lessons and everything, the 10 lessons that we learned. And so if you don't get all of this, don't worry about writing it down. I took the outlines. I've got them back there. They're all filled in for you. All of your notes are in there. So if you got just a piece of paper and you want to copy some things down, some sayings or whatever, cool, because let's go. So let's go to Jonah chapter 2 in verse number 1. And he says that when you hit bottom, you need to understand something. When you hit bottom, there's only one place to look. You can't look any further down. You've got to look up to God. There's no place else to go. So you're looking up to God. And so in Jonah chapter 2, in verse number 1, it said, from the inside of the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. Remember, the sailors all came to him and they said, hey man, what are you doing down here? The captain came down and said, what are you doing asleep? We've been up here doing everything we can to lighten the load. We've been praying to our God. And we don't know our gods. And we don't know about you. But I'm asking you to get up and pray to your God. Because they knew there was something about Jonah that was different than them. And even in this disobedience, God's word was still getting out to the lost that needed it. So God, when people say, I'm at a state where God can't use me, there is no state that you can get in that God can't use you. If you get in a state where God can't use you, you're going out of this state and into his state. He's taking you out of here. Remember what your mama always said, I brought you into this world and I can take you out? That's God. She got that from God. So your mama was speaking the word of God and you didn't even know about it. She could have told you, I've got a message from God. I brought you in, I can take you out. God, thus saith the Lord. Yeah, so when we do this. So again, what we learned about it was that this was not a whale. It was a big fish. Okay? Forget the whale story. It was a big fish that swallowed him. Okay? So he's in here. And if you remember a few weeks back, I showed you the picture of what is called a whale shark, which is capable of doing this. So, the Bible doesn't really tell us where Jonah lived or where he died, okay? But listen, God could have resurrected Jonah anywhere he wanted to. But what we need to understand is God had prepared this big fish for Jonah. Now the thing about it is, it could have been a whole bunch of big fishes because whale sharks swim together. But it just so happened one of them got him. And they generally don't end up eating, man or things like that. They eat plankton and stuff, cleaning that out. And that's how they get their nurture and their food, okay? And you got to understand something, that if God wanted to, he could have had a big fish, and inside of that fish, God could have built a kitchen with the table. There wasn't a microwave and all that stuff back then, but I think he could have prepared a meal, evidently. It doesn't really tell us what happened with Jonah in the 3 days. But I kind of think that Jonah is sitting in this whale, in this big fish. I got to reprogram my mind. In this big fish eating meals that God is preparing. Did you ever think about that? But it doesn't say anywhere that he fasted. It didn't say that he fasted and prayed. It just said he prayed. He's at the bottom. There's no place else to go. And when you hit rock bottom, may I say this? Almost every one of us, when we hit rock bottom, we don't pray to Satan. We pray to God. So we're always looking up, not down. So when you hit rock bottom, there's no place else to go. That's when we all look to God, or should. And Jonah has come to this spot in his life, okay? And he had arranged for this big fish. And there's a story about a little girl, and this little girl was being challenged by this skeptic, because this little girl says, I believe in God. And the skeptic says, well, how could you believe in God? And she's telling him the story of Jonah. And he says, well, how could God create a fish that would swallow a man? And the little girl says, well, I don't know. I'm not God. But when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask Jonah how God did it. And the skeptic said, well, what if Jonah didn't go to heaven? What if he went to hell? And she said, well, then you can ask him. Out of the mouth of babes comes words of wisdom. There are times that you waste your time arguing with these people that say, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in God. Then if you don't believe in God, here is the answer. And I'll tell you it's the truth. Well, what if I don't know? Well, you ask Satan. Because that's where you're going. And then just walk away. They won't know what to say. Okay? But listen, for one thing we do know, a lot of people believe this is a fable. But let me say this to you all. In the Bible, you will find, like when Jesus would tell a parable, he would never use the name of someone. He would always say there was a, or there was this. But in the rich man and Lazarus, there was a name. Lazarus was real. So when God is having the story written, Jonah was a real person who had a real thing happen to him. And I don't know about y'all, but when we get to heaven, we're not going to ask Jonah, how did it feel being in the whale or in the belly of the fish? Because we have knowledge of God, the knowledge of God. But guess what? We're going to know Jonah. Hey, you're the one that we heard all these stories about that everybody said was not right. Wow. This is awesome. That you, out of all, you are very unique, because I never ever read of anybody else that was swallowed by a big fish and then dumped out on some place and told to go do something and got hit in the head with a gourd. And maybe knock some sense into you. Okay, so when we read this, we need to understand some things. So you understand, Jesus tells us, listen, he says that you who are faithless and you intend evil, you keep asking for miraculous proof. But the only miraculous sign that I'm going to give you guys, will be the same sign as Jonah. You want something miraculous? And they kept asking him, how do we know that this is going to happen? He said, I'm going to give you the same sign. For 3 days, Jonah was in the belly of the fish. For 3 days, I'm going to be in the belly of the earth. Just as the fish spit Jonah out, vomited him out onto land, God is going to open the sepulcher, the tomb, and I'm walking out. And you're going to see me walking around. And you're going to know that I'm not dead, but then I'm alive. So the Bible tells us, when we begin to look at these verses, okay, he says, now Jonah, for just as Jonah was in the belly of the huge fish for 3 days and nights, so I, the Son of Man, will be in a grave in the earth for 3 days and nights. And he says, I'm going to die. And then 3 days later, he says, I'm going to resurrect myself. And that's what we kind of call Easter. That's what we celebrate Easter. But then he says, then on Judgment Day, the people of Nineveh are going to stand up in judgment and condemnation of you living now. You who are sitting here and were told about Jesus and didn't believe about Jesus, These people who were not Christians, they were pagan. And when Jonah began to preach the story, they repented. The king, the ruler of Nineveh, said, I don't know whether God's going to change his mind or not. But I want every animal not to be fed for 3 days. I want the animals even with sackcloth and ashes. I want every one of you in humility and humbling yourself and praying to God, not our gods, but to the God of Jonah, that we don't know if he's going to spare this town or not. We know the end of the story, he did. And today, he said, today, those people in Nineveh will stand in judgment of you who are hearing the story that don't believe. One of these days, you and I, we've told people about Jesus. We've told them he's coming. And they've laughed at us, they've spit on us, they've mocked us. One of these days, we will stand in judgment of them. There is one thing that people in hell wish that God could take away, but he didn't, and that is their memory. The rich man, being in torment, lifted up his eyes and he saw Abraham and the bosom or he saw Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham. Who was Lazarus? The poor man, beggar that laid at his doorstep every day begging for crumbs off his table, and he wouldn't give it to him. And he sees Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham enjoying the splendors. Guess what he's going to see then? And guess what he's seeing now? And guess what he's going to see for all eternity? Lazarus enjoying the beauty of heaven while he's suffering the agony of hell. Lazarus in judgment of him. I listened, you didn't. And sometimes people think they're going to get out of this thing and it's just going to all go away, but it's not going away. So we need to understand that, number one, when you hit bottom, again, you look up to God, and you need to understand something, and that is this: God is not a slot machine. That when you pray, you hit this lever, and all of this stuff is just going to come out and just going to bless you with everything. We need to understand some things. And that is this. You've said it, I've said it, and you're probably saying it right now. God, why is everything happening to me? Why is it, God, that when I pray, it doesn't seem to go anywhere? I don't get an answer. May I say something to you all? If God wanted to, he could answer your prayer instantaneously. Right there at that moment on the spot. But can I give you a little secret? God doesn't do that. Most of our prayers are not answered first time. And you want to know why? Because here, you ever had a little kid go into a toy store? And that little kid goes down this aisle and sees these toys. What does that child do? The very first thing they see they want. You take them a little bit further down that aisle, what do they want?
I want that.
I want this, and they'll put the other thing down. Take them into another aisle, and what do?
I want that one too.
I want that one too. God wants to know, do you know what it is that you really need, not what you want? And so sometimes it isn't answered on the, and may I say this to you all, the majority of times that your prayers are not answered the first time, it's because you're asking for the very first thing you see. And the very first thing that you see is really not what you need. That's what you want. And so God's saying, I really know what you need, not what you want. And what I've got to get to you to understand is this. Keep praying, and eventually you will understand that what you're asking for that you want, you don't need. And so therefore, your want goes away, and you begin to understand my thoughts become your thoughts, and I will grant your need. Amen. Not your want. So may I let you into a little secret where God says, pray without ceasing. Because when you pray incessantly, Jonah didn't just say, hey, Lord, here I am in the middle of this belly of this big old fish. It's really nice and comfortable in here, but I would really like to get out. So can you make it so that we can do this like now? And God says, no, this isn't a now. You're going to be here for a little while because you need to understand your need, not your want. And what you're going to end up having. I think I already gave you Mark chapter 9, verses 28 and 29. So what did Jonah say? In verse number 2. We need to pray passionately. And not just pray passionately, ladies and gentlemen. It is to pray passionately with emotion. What's he saying? Jonah said, in my distress and deep trouble, I cried out to the Lord, and he answered me. Last week I had to cry out to God. See, and God, what's going on? What am I doing? Is it what I'm doing? Is it this? Is it that? And he says, keep praying. Keep praying. And when he does, he gives you not what you want. He gives you what you need. A phone call from a little girl to give words of encouragement. That's all I needed. That's all I needed. Something simple. Not asking for a sign. Not throwing out a fleece. But just saying, okay, Lord, what is it? Do I move now? Do I move later? He says, I'm not done. We're not finished. You still have work to do. And if there's 5 people left, you still got work to do. If there's 1 person left, you've still got work to do. Because I'm not done with you yet. I'm not finished with you yet. And he said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of all of the other things. There is a verse or a thing in the Bible, and it talks about lament, okay? And when you read the book of Psalms, in the book of Psalms, there is basically 150 prayers in there. But the greatest book that talks about lamenting means crying out, is the book called Lamentations. And the actual title of the book is The Lamentations of Jeremiah. Jeremiah crying out for his city, crying out for God. God, have you forsaken us? The enemy has taken us over. We keep turning back and going this way and going that way. God, where are you? Will you come and save your people? And he's crying and he's crying and he's crying. And ladies and gentlemen, when is the last time you've really cried out to God? I don't mean just yelling at him. Hey, God, where are you? Can't you see me in my pain? I'm talking about broken. Broken to the point where there is nothing left. You're drained. And understanding that, God, I am at the bottom of the barrel. There is nothing left. I've exhausted. And he says, now, let me show you that the Lord is my strength. My strength is in nothing else, and nothing else is there. And we need to understand these things that are going on. And I may get there and I may not get there. But sometimes we need to also understand that there's the cause of this hopelessness. And in Jonah chapter 2, verses 3 and 4, it says, you cast me into the deep water, and I sank to the bottom of the sea. Everything was churning around me, and I was engulfed by these powerful waves that overwhelmed me. Then I thought I'd been banished from God's presence, and I'll never get to see your holy temple again. I was scared to death, afraid. I was drowning with water choking me. Seaweed wrapped all around my head. I kept sinking down to mountains that rise out of the ocean's floor. I felt locked in a prison forever. That's what he says. This is what I'm feeling. You see, there was a lady in the Bible, her name was Hannah. And Hannah was all her life just wanted a baby. And she made this vow and says, oh Lord Almighty, if you look down upon my sorrow, you answer my prayer, you give me a son, then I will give him back to you, and he will be yours for his entire lifetime. She did, or God did. He gave Hannah a son, and his name was called Samuel. And we all know Samuel well in the life of David. And he was the prophet. There was a poem written over 100 years ago, and it's by a guy by the name of Sam Foss. And it's called the Prayer of Farmer Brown. And here's what it says. The proper way for one to pray, says Pastor Samuel Keyes, is to humble yourself before the Lord and get down on your knees. No, I say that the way to prayer, said Pastor David Wise, is to stand up straight with outstretched arms and eyes turned to the skies. Oh, no, said Pastor Slow. That posture is too proud. We should all pray with eyes closed tight and heads contritely bowed. Well, I believe your hands should be gently clasped in front, with both thumbs pointing towards the ground, said Pastor Johnny Blunt. But last year I fell into a well head first, said Farmer Brown. Both of my feet were sticking up and my head was pointing down. Yet in my distress I called out to God with the most honest words I've said. Yes, the best prayers I've ever heard was standing on my head. So I found somebody that wrote another verse. Then Jonah said, these all may be true for each one of you. So use whichever one you wish. But as for me, my best prayer came in the belly of a fish. It was dark and wet and cold and scary, but my prayers raced like a comet. They streaked across the sky to God and made that big fish vomit. So when and how and where you pray are matters of private fashion. Just be sure when you pray, you present your needs with passion. And that's the gospel truth. It's not the position or the posture of how you pray, ladies and gentlemen. It is the passion in which you pray that matters most of all, and what you're there with. You see, each one of us, we need to identify our hopelessness. And so here, I've got a few questions to ask you. Is this what you're feeling? Number one, I'm feeling that I'm in over my head. You cast me into the deep water, Jonah said. Feeling that I've hit rock bottom. I've sank to the bottom of the sea. I'm feeling out of control and powerless. Jonah said everything was churning around me. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Jonah said I was engulfed by powerful waves that overwhelmed me. I'm feeling rejected or lonely. Jonah said that I thought I've been banished from God's presence. I'm feeling remorse and regret. Jonah said, and I'll never get to see your holy temple again. You're feeling like a crushing fear. Jonah said I was scared to death, afraid I was drowning with water choking me and seaweed wrapped all around my head. Or maybe you're feeling trapped, where Jonah said I felt locked in a prison forever. So what do I do? If I'm in this situation, how can I get out? Let's take Jonah and let's finish the story. Number 4 on there, and you'll see it, is I got to ask for specific help. In Jonah chapter 2, in verse number 2, it says, from the deep in the water of the dead, I asked for help, and you listened to my cry. My question to you is, who are you really asking for help? You say, I'm asking God for help. And God says, okay, you're asking for my help, I'm going to give you help. But the problem is, we're not really asking for his help. We're just asking for a change of situation. To get out of the present situation that I'm in so I can get into another one. If we don't learn from our mistakes, ladies and gentlemen, we can't continue to ask God to get me out of it. When it's over and over and over again. How many times have you told your children, if you keep doing that, you're going to get hurt? And they did it again and they got hurt. What did you tell them? If you keep doing that again, you're going to get hurt? No. See, I told you so. May I say this to you? As best I can, I am a shining example of not learning and doing things over and over and over again with the same results. I am totally insane. That is insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. You don't get different results. Something in there must change. You've got to change something. And if you don't change something, you're going to end up right back at the same place that you were in before. That's just the way it is. So what does he say? In Psalms chapter 30, in verse number 7, I tell you what, how about if we do this? Let's do this, and let's just read the verses. And I'll finish as I get through these things. It says in Psalms 50, verse number 15, call to me in your times of trouble. What's he say? This is God speaking, okay, to the writer of this psalm. And he says, if you call to me in your times of trouble, here's what he said: I will save you. I will save you. But here's a condition. And you will honor me. You know what happens? Lord, I'm in this mess. Okay, I know that. Lord, I really need out. Yeah, I know that. Father, I've been coming to you constantly. Yeah, I know that. And God, can you just help me out of this situation? Yes, I can. Will you? Will you honor me? Yes. Lord, I'm going to give you praise and honor and glory in all things. Okay. Let's see. You get out of the situation and what ends up happening? For a day or two, you're honoring God. The third day, you're right back doing the same thing all over again. How many times do you expect him to get you out of that situation? It ain't going to happen. You see, God's got a better memory than you do and I do. I remember the promise last time, and you weren't too faithful about it. Now, I am faithful, God says. But I also know you. I know your ways. I know your thoughts. I know your intentions. You see, ladies and gentlemen, we can't play games with God. God doesn't lose. And may I say this to you, God's always got the winning hand. I don't care. You may think you've got the best hand there is. You're still going to lose. You can't continue to do these things. So, what do I need to do? I need to ask God for specific help. Next thing is I need to focus on the goodness of God to me. Quit complaining about the bad stuff. It's easy for us to get into a spot where all we do is complain. Look at what Jonah said in verse number 7. When I had lost all hope, I turned my thoughts once more to the Lord, and my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. What happened? Jonah took his eyes off of his situation and put his eyes back on God. The situation didn't go away yet, but God was working on the solution. May I say this to you? You may be in the worst situation in your life, and you may think that it is the worst thing that can happen to you right now. But can I tell you something? If you're earnestly seeking God, he's got something else out here. How do I know? Been there, done that. In 1989, I lost everything that I had. Everything. Except the clothes on our back and 2 vehicles that we were able to save. The house that we thought we were going to live in, we lost it. We had to find a house within 2 weeks before school started. God bless us with a house that we lived in for over 20 some years. The house was built in 1803. It had bats in the belfry. And sometimes people say, well, yeah, you've got all of this stuff. Let me say to you, I could lose everything tomorrow and still be okay. Because I've lost everything, and I know what it's like to lose everything. But just have your family and some friends that care. And may I say to you, that's worth more than anything else in the world. Because money can't buy that stuff. Only God can give you. So if we focus on the goodness, then you understand The goodness of God, ladies and gentlemen, is I will never leave you nor forsake you, no matter what happens. So what do I need to do? The next thing is I need to reject false fixes and accept God's grace. Jonah in chapter 2, verse number 8 says this: those who look to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. Jobs come and go. People come and go. Life comes and goes. Life happens. Our health happens. But the one thing that never, ever leaves us is the grace of God. All of these other things may be temporary fixes, but the grace of God, ladies and gentlemen, is a permanent fix. It is not there just to patch holes. It's to repair and put back together the brokenness that Satan meant to bring you to despair. God says, I can repair so that it doesn't even look like it's been cracked. The scars may be there, but His grace is covering it all and always will be. Last but not least, you need to express gratitude to God in advance, not after the fact. I hear, and sometimes you will hear me say this in my prayers: God, I thank you for what you've done. I thank you for what you're doing. And God, I'm going to praise you even more for what you've got in store and what you're doing, gonna do. Because I can thank Him right now for these things, but what about thanking Him in advance for things that I don't even know about yet? He's got a plan for me and you. And may I say this to you, it is a perfect plan that He thought out. Did you ever get this? Every one of you that God so wonderfully created. And when He looked at you, He not just said to Adam or to the angels about Adam, He says, this is the best of the best. This is very best creation. And Satan at that point, he's getting upset because Lucifer thought, I'm the best of the creation. Look at me, I'm so beautiful with all of my jewels, and I just exalt your glory and your radiance and your brilliance through all the universe. And God says, no, I got Adam. He's the best of the best. And we look at it and we think we're the worst. And God says, no, look at yourself from my perspective. My perspective is you are wonderful, wonderfully created. And the plan that I've got for you is the very best plan. So do you think that I'm going to throw you away? No. I got plans for you. He says, I will sing a song of thanksgiving. I will sacrifice to you, and I will do what I have promised you to do. When you gave your life to Christ, ladies and gentlemen, you promised Him, I will serve you. I will serve you till the day I die. My question is, how faithful are we to the promise? How do I do that? I do that through singing. You know, the best medicine, and they even found this out in hospitals and with sick people. When they've given them medication that doesn't work, they come in there and they play a song. And all of a sudden, those people who were agitated, people with my mother who has dementia, and sometimes she'll go off on a minute, won't remember you. Ask her to sing a song that she knows. She will start singing that song, and her appearance changes. Her personality changes. She starts smiling and laughing and everything. Why? Because a happy song changes everything. He said, I will sing a song of thanksgiving. When's the last time you made up a song? Lord, I thank you. I thank you for all things. Through giving back to God. What are you giving to God? I mean, think about it. What are you really giving to God lately? God, I'll give you an hour on Sunday. For most people, that's cool. Except they won't come to this church because this church, we kind of ask for an hour and a half. Because I'm long-winded. You know, I can't get everything done in an hour. And so a lot of people, honestly, you think I'm kidding with you. I am telling you the truth. There are a lot of people that will not come here because they know that we start at 10:30 and we don't generally get done till 12. That's too long. I can't sit that long. My kids can't sit that long. They sit that long in school. Well, that's because the teacher makes them. Okay, then sit them under your arms and you make them. That doesn't work. Oh, yes, it does. I'm a firm example of that one. It works real good. And we tried it with our kids, and it worked well, too. And then later on, we let them sit somewhere else. They earned that. But look at what God says. For God's gifts and his call are irrevocable in Romans 11:29. And so, here's the end of this story for right now. So in Jonah chapter 10, verse number 10, so the Lord ordered the great fish to vomit Jonah onto a beach. I don't know about y'all, but have y'all seen the beaches in Florida with all the hurricanes and stuff? They got a lot of garbage. How would you like to be on one of those beaches and the big old fish comes up and just, and out comes this old man? I don't think I'd want to go to that beach anymore. But let me tell you something. When Jonah came out of the belly of that whale, or of that fish, gotta quit saying that, the belly of that fish, he was not the same Jonah that went into the belly of the fish. He was crying to the Lord. And going out of there, he was saying, okay, Lord, give me some happy feet. I'm moving as far away from here as I can. He wasn't looking for a boat to get back on the sea. He was looking for his feet to help travel on the land. Let me say this to you. When you get into these things, and God puts you there, ladies and gentlemen, you will come out changed if you learn what he's got you in there for.